Hi guys, Elle here. Today we're gonna talk Minchiate. That's right. So what I really want to do is just give a quick sort of overview about what a Minchiate deck is, and then I'm gonna jump right into showing you guys how I sort of go about working with Minchiate decks. So what we're specifically going to be talking about and working with today are the Italian Minchiate decks. They are 97 card tarot decks. And they are really still tarot decks. You know, there's the addition of a number of cards. The numbering has been changed. Some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent. But yeah, they're still very reminiscent of tarot. They're still called Minchiate Tarot decks. We'll get into all the differences and stuff. They're really, really fascinating. But there is another type of Minchiate deck. It's a 98 card deck, usually referred to as like the Michiate Francesi, and it's a French Minchiate basically. They're very hard to find decks that follow that pattern. They still have a lot of what the Italian Minchiates have, but there's a lot of really, really big differences. One of the biggest differences actually with those decks that I just love, if you look it up online, it's easy to find. Maybe I'll put a link below or something, but it's easy to find scans from some of those decks. And one of the ones that I stumble across really often is the Fool card, and it's called Chaos in those decks, not in these Italian Minchiate decks, but in those Minchiate Francesi decks, and it's called Chaos, just like you have in your Ettilla decks. How cool is that? This one doesn't specifically say Chaos on it, but it looks like the Fool, but it's called Chaos. There's lots of really, really interesting stuff with those decks. The Minchiate Francesi is interesting too because it's missing a lot of traditional tarot cards. Like there's no chariot, there's no tower, there's no devil. All those things, there really is a correspondence for like every single tarot card that we're familiar with in your traditional Italian Minchiate deck. All right, I'm gonna stop talking about something that we're not talking about today, but today, Italian Minchiate only. So, I have pulled out basically the two Minchiate decks that I have, and then I've shown you guys this before, but I made my own tarot deck, right? And I included extra cards to sort of turn it into a Minchiate deck. So I'll show you guys a little bit of that as we go. But basically, I just want to give you guys a quick list of Minchiate decks that are available out there. So the first deck is the Minchiate Etrurie. That's what the backs look like. And this is the oldest existing complete Minchiate tarot, and it dates from about 1725. Now, Minchiate has been around since at least the 1500s. You find references to it. It went by different names throughout the ages. It's been called the Germany or Gemini deck, which is probably a take on Gemini, which is the last of the astrological signs that you find in the deck here, the last one in terms of ordering. It's also been referred to as the Gallerini deck in certain parts of Italy, and then in that case, a standard tarot deck of, consisting of like the 22 major arcana would be referred to as like a little Gallerini, as opposed to the expanded and extended major arcana that you find in your regular Minchiate decks. But yeah, you find references to it in writings from that time, and then there's periodic cards and bits and pieces of decks. But the Etrurie is the first or the oldest complete surviving deck that we actually have. Il Meneghello makes a copy of this deck. The one that I have, this one with these backings, is the Lo Scarabeo version. This is what the book looks like, and that's what the outside of the box looks like too. I will still do reviews on all these decks and show you guys all the cards and everything. I'm not going to do that today. And then the other deck that I have is, in fact, an Il Meneghello deck. That's what the backs of those guys look like. This is what the fronts look like. Here, I'll show you both, actually. This is the Etrurie Fool, and this is the Minchiate Fiorentine, or Fiorentine. That's that guy with these backs. Oh my god, I'm confusing people. But this deck dates from about 1850 or so it's a much later Minchiate deck than the Etrurie. But those are the two that I have, and I'll be showing you guys cards from both of those decks. So there are also a number of other readily available Minchiate decks out there. There is another historic reproduction called the Minchiate a Leon, which dates from about 1790, I think. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. Totally on the wish list. There's even this one deck by Brian Williams that has been sitting on my wish list for a really long time. I think it's just called the Minchiate Tarot or something like that. But what he's done is created a modern Minchiate deck. He redrew, because he's an artist, he redrew the whole thing. They're sort of in these pastel-y colors, and the artwork isn't necessarily to my taste, so I've sort of held off on it for a while. But I heard that the book is really interesting, so at some point I'm going to scoop that guy up too. But really, there's not a ton of Minchiate decks available out there. The Minchiate Etrurie is certainly, and especially this Lo Scarabeo version, is probably the most common one that I've seen out there. So the Minchiate Tarot is a card game, just like all the other tarot decks, right? TarotBG and all that stuff. And what I find so utterly fascinating about the whole thing is that, yes, it's a game that people have played for centuries and centuries, but that certainly in no way diminishes the fact that there are these truths sort of encoded into our card games. You can even see it with our modern playing cards, right? I think it's the same way that ancient myths have sort of come down to us through the generations, right? These sort of almost silly stories about silly gods doing these silly things. But of course, we understand that it's a metaphor. It's a way for this ancient knowledge, this ancient spiritual truths to be passed down through the generations. And that's exactly how I look at the game of tarot too. It very clearly still shows this amazing story in the cards, you know? So I think it's sort of odd when people are like, you know, it's just a game, like that's where it came from. It didn't come from ancient Egypt. It doesn't hold these sacred truths. It's just a card game. And yeah, it's just a card game, but you know, it's there, it's ancient, it's this knowledge, and who cares where the fuck it actually originally came from. It holds this storehouse of wisdom. I just love that. Okay, so the good stuff. Minchiate structure, right? There are 41 trump cards, triomphi, triumphs as they're called. Also, or AKA the major arcana, right? Now, let's take a look at the differences in the major arcana, shall we? So what you have here, let me get them out. I'm going to use the Minchiate Etrurie to show you guys. Basically, what you have is every single card that you are already familiar with in some way, shape, or form in here. The only thing that I feel like is explicitly missing is a proper high priestess. And then your empress, your emperor, and your hierophant, I believe, are really in here really quite well, but their names are a little bit different. This is that whole, their names have been changed to protect the innocent. So here is your fool. Here is your magician. All right, similar to how they were in a lot of older decks too. These aren't that far off from just older decks in general. They're very different from Rider-Waite looking cards, but they hold the same meaning, you know? So here's where things sort of change a little bit. This is your number 2 card. Now, I have associated this card, number 2, called the Grand Duke, with the Empress, and a lot of people do this too. First of all, he looks very, very feminine, and a lot of the symbolism on the card, I think, really evokes what the Empress is sort of all about, you know? I think it's sort of cool too, because with me and my sort of runic associations, the Empress is associated with Thurisaz, which has a little bit more of that masculine sort of energy about it. So I like that whole Empress as a male thing too. It even sort of, for me, neuters the entire gender issue of the Empress. You know, it still is about creation. It still is about manifestation. It still holds all those meanings for me. But I think it's cool to have it represented as a man here. Okay, and then number 3 here, this is your Emperor of the West. And number 4 is your Emperor of the East. And number 3, your Western Emperor, I associate with the Emperor himself. And number 4, the Eastern Emperor with the Hierophant, or the Pope. Let me show you guys that card again. Or actually, let me show you both of them. So I feel like this works. Your Western Emperor works really well for the Emperor himself. Look, there's animals, there's all these crosses. You know, that it just works. And then number 4, your Eastern Emperor, he really works for me for the Pope or for the Hierophant. If you look at some of the symbols he's got there, right up there around his arm, right above that globe that he's holding, there's a Seal of Solomon, a 6-pointed star. And he's holding a wand, and the way he's seated, I don't know, the whole thing, it just works Pope, you know? It screams Pope. So we'll get back to what I do to make up for the lack of a High Priestess in a second. So as far as I'm concerned, those are the biggest changes to what you might be familiar with in the Major Arcana, just those few cards right at the beginning. From there, we go on to, now the numbering is very, very different, but you still see a Lover's card, a Temperance card, a Strength card, a Justice card, a Wheel card, your Chariot card. Your Chariot is numbered number 10 here, but take a look at that, by the way. It's a very peaceful looking woman riding the Chariot in this deck. How great is that? Instead of your armored warrior man. But these are all very familiar. Your Hermit card is one of those old style Father Time cards that you see here. I know we just did that Chez Monet or Kai Monet, fucking however you say it. Anyway, it's one of those, you know, Father Time style hermits that we saw in that deck too. But he still, you know, he still encompasses all the meaning of the Hermit. And then you still have a Hanged Man card. Actually, he's number 12 too here. And then you have Death, you have the Devil, and you have the Tower. This is what your Tower card looks like in the Etrurie deck. Like I said, I'm going to do a review of this whole deck later. I'll show you guys more of the cards. And that is numbered 15 here, the Tower, as opposed to your classic 16. The Tower card, by the way, here, guys, is often called the House of the Devil, as opposed to the House of God, right? La Maison Dieu, is that how you say it? But that's what it's normally called in your Marseille decks, right? The House of God. And here it's the House of the Devil, the Devil's House, or the Hellmouth. But you can see a woman running out of a tower. It's a very different depiction. And it looks like it's hard to tell. I always wonder if someone's sort of chasing after her, if it's just another person running out of the burning building or the burning tower. Let me know what you think. Okay, so here's where things get extra good. Here's some of your extra cards. So the next 4 cards, pull them out here, are virtue cards. So they include the 3 theological virtues, which are hope, charity, and faith. And then there's also one of the cardinal virtue cards, prudence. This is the prudence card right here. Isn't that neat? So basically what they've done is they've managed to include the 7 virtues into the Minchiate deck. We already have the other 3 cardinal virtues already in our tarot deck, right? We have justice, we have temperance, and we have strength or fortitude. So actually the only other tarot deck out there that includes these 3 theological virtues, as opposed to like the 4 cardinal virtues, is the Visconti di Madrone, the Carriel Visconti deck. It has faith, charity, and hope as part of the Major Arcana cards. If you take a look at it, it's very cool. I think it's really interesting too, actually, that in your Ettilla decks, you see prudence giving you the 4 cardinal virtues in your tarot deck. And you see prudence, here's what it looks like in one of the Ettilla decks. This is the Ettilla 3 deck, the Book of Thoth. But basically this card replaces the Hanged Man. And it has, as far as I'm concerned, with the way I read it anyway, is very similar to how you go about reading the Hanged Man anyway. And then here's your prudence in another Ettilla deck. So it has all 4 cardinal virtues in your Ettilla deck. there's this interesting theory out there that that prudence really isn't omitted. That fourth cardinal virtue isn't omitted from your regular tarot deck, your regular 22 cards of the major arcana. And the theory goes that it's the three virtues that are included are the three parts of the soul according to Pythagoras. So it's like his three virtues. But they would be, you know, the lowest part of your soul, your animal nature, the part that's trying to control your appetites, is represented by the strength card. And then the second part of your soul that has to do with ambition and power is ruled by temperance. And then in this theory, the third part of your soul, the part that has to do with your rational self and has to do with balancing out all the other parts of your soul, would be justice. Very interesting. Okay, so the actual ordering for the 4 extra virtue cards, it actually starts with hope. Which, how cool is that it comes right after the Tower card anyway, because normally what do you see there right after the Tower card? 16 leads you into 17, which is the Star, hope. So yeah, there's your hope virtue. There is a Star card in this deck, though. I'll show you guys that when we get to it. There's prudence again. I just showed you that one. That is 16, 17, excuse me. And then 18 is faith. And 19 here is charity. Beautiful. I love that card. Isn't that amazing? The artwork on this Etrurie deck is just, it's mind-blowing. It's so beautiful. All right, so the next 4 cards in our expanded Minchiate Major Arcana, the next 4 are your elemental cards. So you have fire, you have water, you have earth. You see that? Oh, that's such a beautiful card. My lighting is shit today, sorry guys. And then you have air. That's the next 4 cards. It really is, it's a deep fucking deck. It's so great. So your next 12 cards are, how cool is this? The 12 signs of the Zodiac, and it starts with Libra. And then you have Virgo. Now, it's interesting to me that these are not in any particular order. They're sort of chaotically mixed up and thrown in. But you get the idea. You have all 12 signs of the Zodiac. Look at the Capricorn. Oh my God, how beautiful is that? Love. And it ends, the very last card here is, dun, 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 dun. Where is it? Gemini. Oh, there it is. There's your Gemini. That's the last one here. And then your last 5 cards are, they're also called the Airy, by the way. But your last 5 cards, your highest cards in the deck when you're playing the game, Minchiate and Tarot and all that, I find it interesting too, because in just, you know, our esoteric tarot and divining with the tarot and all that, there is something, sometimes I think of it as happening at the sun, but things get the celestial starting with the star. Things get really, really big and interesting, and that's what you have here at the last 5 cards. You have the star, you have the moon, you have the sun, your traditional ordering there, and then your last 2 cards are Judgment and the World. However, the ordering is reversed. So you have Judgment, or the Trumpets, as it's also called in this deck, as the last card. The World comes right before that, and it's numbered, what is that, 39. And then 40 is the Trumpets, or the Judgment card. I find that interesting too, with like I was talking about before with my runic sort of associations. I think people will often flip-flop the last two runes, right? Instead of ending with Othala, for some reason they flip it around, and they'll end with Dagas. It's sort of like this coming home, this union and everything sort of comes before that transformation. So I don't really mind that flip-flop. I think it's an interesting idea to sit with. That little change in ordering there is very interesting to me. So I pulled out the last 5 cards from the Minchiate Etrurie, my Meneghello deck, and you can see they're all colored red, as opposed to like the rest of the major arcana that all have this sort of a normal colored background, you know? The other interesting thing in this deck, actually, it kills me. I have no idea what the significance of it is, but here are the 12 astrological signs, right? The 12 signs of the Zodiac, just like we saw in the other deck, all with the normal colored background until you get to, what is it, the last 3 cards here? Then they take on the red color that you see at the very end of the tarot deck in the airy cards. And it's, what is it, Leo, the Lion, Taurus, and Gemini. The last 3 Zodiac cards are just colored red. As if we're coming to some revelation, some conclusion. I sort of understand the different coloring in the last 5 cards here, but at the end of this sort of chaotic pattern of Zodiac signs, no idea, but fascinating. I'll get to the bottom of it one day, I will. So when it comes to the Zodiac cards, the 12 Zodiac signs, right? I think it's so fascinating that they are a whole separate thing in this tarot deck. How many books have you guys read, right, where they associate a Zodiac sign and a planetary sign to each and every card? And don't get me wrong, I agree with a lot of them. I disagree with a whole lot of them. But I think that is perfectly accurate and a very cool way to sort of deepen your understanding of each and every card. One of my favorite authors, right, Christine Payne Towler, is so all about the astrology and the tarot. And I think it's so interesting. But what I find interesting too is that in this old deck, remember they were around back in the 1500s, that there's a deck that has a whole separate section for the Zodiac signs. You know, it makes you wonder if originally there was really supposed to be astrological correspondences for all these other major arcana cards. Yeah, I certainly don't have an answer to that question, but I think it's really interesting that this deck exists the way it does. So after that, when you get into your minor arcana and your typical Minchiate decks, things are pretty standard. You still have your 56 cards in the minor arcana. You still have, you know, wands, cups, swords, and coins. The biggest difference, I think, comes with the court cards. I think they're really, really fascinating here. I think I mentioned this before in my tarot collection videos. But in your feminine suits, your cups and your coins, you have feminine or female pages. And then in the swords and batons, you have male pages. And then the other cool thing about the courts in this deck are in your two masculine suits, the knights are both centaurs. They're both half horse. And then in your feminine suits, in your pentacles or your coins, this one's like half lion. They're all male knights, but it differs from suit to suit. And then in your cups is like sort of a griffin or a lion with wings and the tail of a serpent or something. Aren't they neat? Oh, I love the knights in this deck. They're so cool. So as far as I'm concerned, the only major arcana card that is actually missing from the deck is a High Priestess card. So let me show you what I've done and how I sort of make up for that, because I have no interest for some reason in reading without a High Priestess card. I think she's sort of vital to tarot, you know? Now, a lot of people say that one of the virtue cards, a lot of people will associate faith with the High Priestess, but they'll take one of those cards and sort of designate it as their High Priestess card. And I'm no different. I've done the same thing. I've played around with just not having a High Priestess and just using the deck as is, and I just didn't love it. I felt like I was missing something. So here we're gonna throw tradition out the window and sort of do your own thing. So what I do, I'm going to show you with my Minchiate Florentine. I put my Minchiate Etrurie totally back in order so I can show you guys the cards, but this one I've left sort of how I use it. So here is the Fool, and then the Magician, and then, boom, we get to what looks like a High Priestess, right? She sort of does to me. Basically, she is the charity card from the virtues. Now, I said before in the other deck how that the Grand Duke works for me for the Emperor, and he does in that deck, so I leave that one alone. But in this one, it just didn't seem to work as well, even though the pictures are super, super similar. So what I did was I swapped out the Faith card to give me a female Empress card. So I just sort of ignore the numbering. I kind of ignore a lot of the numbering anyway in this deck. Because I'm so, trained with my tarot numbering system that I just sort of put that out of my head with this. And then it goes straight on just like before. Number 3 becomes my Emperor, who would normally be 4, and then number 4 becomes my Pope, my Hierophant. None of these are named actually on the cards anyway, so it kind of works really well. And then we go on with Love and Temperance and Strength and blah, blah, blah. And I have left out the other 2 virtue cards. I just set them aside. You could, if you want to do what I've done to use a Minchiate deck, you can pick out whatever virtue images work for you for the High Priestess, and then if you want to, also for the Empress card. But I just lay them aside and don't use them. Everything else I have actually kept exactly the same. I keep the 4 elements in my deck, and I keep the 12 signs of the Zodiac in my deck. So when it comes to assigning meanings to all of these things, the ones that you sort of have to figure things out for yourself are the additional cards. There's not a lot of information out there for these cards for their divinatory meanings. The Minchiate Etrurie comes with a great little book that gives you some divinatory meanings, and some of them I found great. They're a great starting off point. And I think it just requires, a certain amount of patience and research maybe on your part if you're not super familiar with the signs of the Zodiac and their astrology meanings, If you're not fully versed in astrology, you're going to have to do a little research and figure out even how you want to go about reading with these cards. The 4 elements, I think, are actually easy to kind of work with, because when you're studying tarot, one of the things that you're studying is elements and their correspondences, right? So at first I was like, is this sort of like an ace? But I think it's really, really very different in how I go about interpreting with them. Where your ace certainly does have a lot to do with that element in general, it still is a number 1. It's still that seed form, It's at the very beginning, and all those connotations sort of go with it. For me, when I'm reading with a Minchiate and an element card comes up, you have to remember, these are still major arcana cards. This isn't a minor arcana ace. This is a big influence. And of course it's going to change depending on the reading and how I'm feeling and what we're reading about and the cards next to it and all that shit. But it's like big fire working its way through your life, this it's almost sometimes even an outside force or an inner spark. Yeah, that's sort of the best way I can describe it right now. And then as far as the astrological cards go, I had a lot of fun delving back into sort of my old astrology books and picking out what I thought was really relevant to the cards, So you really have to figure out sort of your own meanings for most of these cards, at least all of the extra cards. Like I said, I do want to get that Brian Williams book and see what he sort of talks about. I know there's divinatory meanings in there, but as far as I know, there's really no other sources that we can go to find divinatory meanings for like the astrological zodiac sign cards. This was the first Minchiate deck that I got, the Minchiate Etrurie, and it actually gives you divinatory meanings for each card, like I said, but they are very, very short and sweet. Which, for the rest of the tarot deck, it's fine. It's like, okay, it's just like a little white book. But for your Zodiac cards, you're starting from 0, with your element cards and your virtue cards. And 2 little sentences, 1 positive and 1 negative, it's not really going to flesh out your readings. Like for Leo here, it says, proving oneself to be charismatic and generous. And then the negative one would be a tendency to excesses caused by an overwhelming desire to stand out, being gullible or overly naive. So yeah, all that stuff is totally true, and I've taken these meanings and written them down, but I've also had to flesh them out quite a bit. Where's the Leo card? Let's do Leo. Okay, I found my Leo. There he is. So to sort of flesh out the meaning, I just take what I know about Leos. You know, Leos, they want to have purpose. They demand perfection. They always want to be active. They want to be someone, really be someone, you know? They don't like being controlled. They hate being dominated or controlled. They don't take criticism very well. They also have a great sense of devotion, you know? They will sacrifice anything and everything to achieve their ends, to achieve their goals, to get what they want. It can also be to their detriment, that sense of devotion, you know. They'll stick with something to the bitter end, even when they perhaps should have given up a long time ago. So, you know, stuff like that. All that stuff sort of comes to mind when I see a Leo card, and we just sort of go from there, you know. If you guys want, I can do another video. I'd be happy to do another video. If there's interest out there, I guess, and give you guys an outline sort of my meanings for all the extra cards. It'd be a lot to sort of go through every single one right now, but I'd be happy to do that, so let me know if you're interested. I think the astrological ones are actually really, really easy to find information on out there. There's just a myriad of websites and books and things out there on the 12 signs of the Zodiac, and what they mean in a person's personality and what they mean cosmically, you know. So how I went about assigning meaning to each of the Zodiac cards for the Minchiate deck was I went back to square one and sort of set out to study the signs of the Zodiac in a little bit of a different way. I reread some books, and I pulled out a few that really, really helped me. One of them is just your basic, one of them is just your basic astrology book. It's like what is it called? The Astrologer's Handbook. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the authors. Oh my god. I have a really old copy of this, but it's very, very basic. And really what just helped me was like this part up here where it's just a couple pages. Can you see that? On like Gemini, you know, just a few pages, and just runs through, you know, what personality traits and things like that. I found this one super, super helpful. This one's called Reflection, Psychoanalyzing the 12 Zodiacal Types, and this is by Manly P. Hall. You can actually find this on like Kindle or Amazon for like 99 cents. It's super, super cheap. That made me turn red. Come back. It's super, super cheap, but it is a fantastic book for how it sort of summed up how I go about reading with these cards now. Though they are part of the major arcana, like I was saying before, these are big energies running through your life, running through your personality. I do sort of come at them from a little bit of how I read court cards, and only in that they can mean several different things. I interpret court cards as sometimes being an aspect of your personality, as sometimes representing another person in your life, as sometimes representing, you know, this energy that's sort of running through your life and pushing you in this direction, or even sometimes an aspect or a trait that you want to encompass, that you should incorporate into yourself or into your life. And that's how I go about reading kind of all the extra cards here. You know, they're not necessarily just this one thing. They can even be, and this has come up a lot, they can represent a time. You know, each zodiac sign can correspond to a month in a year. So, you know, if you're asking a question about timing, right, and I don't know, say Capricorn comes up, it could easily denote that what you're waiting for is going to happen in December, you know? I like to use the Zodiac, the astrological cards, as a bit of a calendar sometimes. Of course, you can even do the same thing with the minor arcana in general, in any single deck, right? You have, what, 52 weeks in a year, and you have 56 cards. If you do something like Christine Payne-Towler did with all the pages and assign them to a season, you're left with 52 cards, and that could easily be associated with a different time or a different week even of the year. So then the last book I have, this is Esoteric Astrology by Alice A. Bailey, and this is a very, very in-depth theosophic interpretation of astrology. I love this book. It really helped me flesh out my understanding of astrology on a much, much deeper level, so love that book. And it again is one I went back to when I started getting into Minchiate and really had to sit and figure out what each of these extra cards were trying to tell me, you know? So the only thing that I would recommend when you're learning an entirely new system like the Minchiate is to, well, specifically to Minchiate, take out the 12 Zodiac cards. If you're going to work with the virtues, take out the virtues and then take out the 4 elemental cards and just do some mini readings with just those cards. Of course, this is after you've already sort of resolved how you're going to go about interpreting them and have assigned them all sort of meanings in your head and memorized them and all that. That's what I did. I did just readings with the Zodiac cards. And although it was just for practice, I wasn't really trying to get anything out of it. It's not really a complete system. It's a really, really good way to practice. And you even really get some interesting information that sort of comes through anyway. But I would practice like that. That really helped me out. Benebell Wen on her blog or on her website has a review up of the Minchiate Etrurie, and in it she sort of jokingly says that Minchiate is her fad of choice over, like, say, a Lenormand or something. And I think there's something to be said for that, you know, not, as she said it jokingly, you know, not that Lenormand really is a fad. It's sort of this really, really old system of divination that's fascinating. But I think that the same thing happens to a lot of us, right? When you're studying tarot and using tarot for a long time, you know, you sort of want to branch out and discover new things and delve into oracle decks or Lenormand or playing card divination or Sibylla. You know, there's all this other cool sort of stuff that really fits well with what we do with the tarot. And I sort of agree with her. I enjoy Lenormand, but it's such a very different sort of a system. It's a whole nother world, you know? This, while it is a whole nother world and you really have to sort of expand your horizons and go back to the drawing board with the Minchiate deck, it still fits real nicely with what you already know of the tarot. It's a fun fad. So I'm thinking about starting a little series probably next month where I'll do like a monthly free tarot reading, and I would definitely like to do some Minchiate readings during those too, so I can just sort of show you guys how I read with it. I'm not gonna do any readings for you right now, but I hope that gives you a general idea about how I go about, you know, using my Minchiate decks. I did show you guys already the deck that I made. If you go and look up, what is it, Make Your Own Tarot Deck and My Self-Made Decks, that's the title of 2 videos that I have out there where I show you guys my entire deck, including what I have lovingly come to refer to as my Minchiate extension. What I did is I took my basic tarot deck that I made of 78 cards, and then I added 16 extra cards. I added the 12 zodiac signs, and I added the 3 elemental cards. I left out the virtues since I don't really read with them anyway. But I created my own Minchiate deck while I made my own tarot deck. What's that guy? So yeah, I hope this video helps. If you guys use Minchiate out there, I'd love to hear how you guys go about reading with them. And any opinions you have about what I do or any questions about Minchiate in general. I am obsessed. I love it. It's a wonderful alternative to the classic tarot. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time. Bye.